Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone 2 Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Computer. All right. Well, welcome, folks, and we're awfully glad to have you joining us today on The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and I am your host. And today I am excited to have Terri Lambe with me. Now, Terri and I go way, way back. At one time, I think she was my original Home Again microchip sales rep. And then when I started my business, she was gracious enough to have me come and work with some of her practices. And now she is a regional business development manager and consultant for Innovative Petcare. Innovative Petcare owns, operates, and invests in veterinary hospitals across the country. They specialize in collaborative, customizable partnerships for veterinary hospitals and owners, joint ventures, expansion partnerships, full acquisitions. Terri is also a certified speaker and leadership coach and trainer with the John Maxwell team, and she's founder of Unleash Life LLC. Prior to Innovative, her career was spent in the animal health industry for global Fortune 500 pharmaceutical companies. And prior to that, she spent 16 years in a variety of arenas, including legal, business, finance, and real estate. What I think everybody also should know is that she's a very talented singer, and she was in a band. And she also is, I think you told me you were the preacher's daughter. So she does some ministries, and she comes from a group of a family of small business owners. So she has entrepreneurial spirit in her DNA. And she enjoys speaking to nonprofits and businesses and women's groups. And she's been doing that for quite a while. She's also extremely interested and proactive in fitness and nutrition and wellness topics. She's a former fitness competitor, and she's coached women in those areas. I may have to just put her on retainer with me after this COVID over my board. All I do is sit behind this desk, and my rear end is getting wider and wider. So her passion is speaking life into and provoking thought to unleash the best within groups or individuals. So I am really, really pumped that she's here today with me to talk about her bend in the road, and actually her multiple bends in the road, and her career path and her goals in life, and how she's really worked through so many obstacles to get where she is today, enjoying her life and being a blessing to all of those that she reaches out to. So Terri, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's great to be connected with you again. We haven't seen each other in a while, but we watch each other on social media, which is what we do, right?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what your original goals were. You know, it's that question of what you want to be when you grow up.
That's a great, you made me dig way back for that. I had to really think about that. First, I just want to say thank you for having me today. I'm very humbled that you asked me to be a part of this. Watching your journey from being a practice manager many years ago, like you said, to developing your own veterinary consulting business and being where you are, props to you. I couldn't be more excited. I love celebrating other successful women and friends. And so first, I want to say that because I love seeing where you were and where you've come to as well. Maybe I need to interview you one day.
We can work that out. Yeah, we can work that out. Yeah, it's been a long and fun journey, and I can honestly say, yeah, there's been some bumps in the road, obviously some bends, like, the theme of this meeting with us today, but it's been fun every minute of it. I wouldn't change anything that happened, and
Right.
it's all comes out for the best.
That's true. True. So to your original question, what was my original goal in life? I remembered as I was thinking about that question, when I was 7 years old, I told my dad, who used to study with me a lot. We loved flashcards, and he spent a lot of time studying with me. I was kind of a geek. I did, up until the age of 10, I did like mathematic competitions and spelling bees and one and stuff. And so I really was a book person, but it was funny. I told him that I wanted to be the first woman president. I had forgotten all about that. And I started thinking back and I was like, oh my God, I did tell him that. I also said that I wanted to be a famous singer. And, because I had been singing since the age of 5 publicly, was kind of when I started my first public appearance, if you will. So that was kind of my first thing. But more realistically, later in life, my interest sort of developed and channeled into psychology and law. I think in my teens, later on, I was considering and contemplating either child psychology or being an attorney or going into the legal field in some sector.
And
I always, even back then as a teen, like I was DECA president in high school. I worked full time while going to high school. And so the business area in general really appealed to me also. And especially, like you said, coming from a family of small business owners. So I think there was this like commingled thing of, business, psychology, law, and overall, those were kind of my mainstream goals that appealed to me.
right. Well, there's still time for you to be the first woman president because we're still trying to fill that gap. But tell me, so what path did you follow to achieve that goal, or even and your singing goal too? Because you did, you were singing a lot when I first met you.
Yes. So, well, I was never the starving artist type. In my mind, I remember thinking, I can do both. I can still sing, but I can still have a career. And if I don't really make it any further in singing, I would still have a livelihood and I could do both. And so that's what I did pretty much. I started out, I pursued an education like out of high school. I started taking some courses in psychology and community college. And then from there went to a business college and got my associate's degree in business and paralegal studies. So I kind of combined the two, and I learned a lot. It was a great track for me. And then I finished up getting my undergrad at Guilford College in criminal justice. So, and criminal justice kind of combines a lot of those things as well, especially like the psychology part of it and the legal part of it. So that was where I got my undergrad. And I worked full time as a paralegal actually while I acquired that degree. And that really taught me a lot. It required a lot of discipline to get through that. And that was kind of where I started. And I got a paralegal job, when I first moved to Greensboro after I got my associate's degree in a private practice firm, and then pursued my undergrad while I was doing that. And that sort of took me on a trail of another, private practice. And then I went to corporate litigation for global Fortune 500 company. And that was sort of the first part of my career. It was in the legal field. And I came to a crossroads. I think it was about, I don't know, mid to late 20s. And I was considering law school. And I remember talking to one of the attorneys, and I said, and he was a mentor of mine. He was a senior partner. And I said, I'm not really sure if I want to go to law school or if I want to explore the pharmaceutical sales industry. I had heard a lot about it since I'd moved to the area. And before that, it wasn't something I'd really heard much about. So I was contemplating both. And his words to me were, you're young enough and you have a chance to explore something different. and make a great living without the debt. And at that time, there was an abundance of attorneys graduating that it was harder for them to find jobs, and they weren't starting out with the pay, and then they had all the student debt. And I think, we've seen that at times in the shifts in the veterinary world as well. And so he said, I would go for it. You can always come back and go to law school. And so that was when I put my toe into the pharmaceutical animal health arena, on the manufacturing side, and I never looked back.
And that's how we met, because
And that's how we met.
I think that Home Again microchips had just launched, and and it was a completely new technology. And I remember you coming in with the reader and showing us how to insert the microchips and talking about all the deals and stuff. But now tell me, how did life throw you a curveball? What was your bend in the road?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I don't just have one. I don't know that anybody just has one. So I was trying to, look at the overall landscape and decide, what was my biggest one, or which one would I say was the greatest. So I sort of compiled them, if you will, because I think I had several a little bit back to back during my profession in the pharmaceutical manufacturing side. Now, like you said, I was doing device sales, and then I inherited the full portfolio in vaccines and parasiticides and pharmaceuticals. And I think I did Home Again for maybe a year. Mm-hmm. And so the curveballs kind of started a little bit later in my life for me. Early on, probably my first curveball was I was born with a heart defect that they said if I lived, I would be a physical vegetable. That was how the doctor explained it in the 70s. And I healed on my own. I did not recognize the birth defect. According to the doctors, I started putting on weight. They said I wouldn't do that. And that was probably the first curveball when I came into the world. I think I came out having to fight for my life. And I think that has certainly been a part of my personality ever since. And my mom, of course, her faith had to carry me through that. But, there's no signs of the birth defect now. It was a very serious one. Having surgery was serious. And so I just always had kind of a fighter spirit. And I attribute it to certainly my mom's prayers and her faith from the very beginning. And that was probably, as a family, our huge curveball, at least in my life, as I started. And so then later in life, you have a lot of different things that happen throughout your life. But I think some of the bigger curveballs for me were in my 30s, when I was managing a traveling career. At that time, I think I had most of the Carolinas. And I was also juggling caretaking for my father and my great aunt, because he was her caretaker. They both fell ill at the same time. And so that was when I had to take over both of them. I was his power of attorney. And so I think that was probably, that kind of started some things for me with having to do with caretaking and managing all of that kind of stuff. I think there are different curveballs that we have in life. I think some of them are a little bit normal. We kind of expect them, but they are maybe not as fast paced. You have some that are faster and they come at you hard and fast that you don't expect. And then you have others that are sort of intermediate, that they're a little bit slower, but they still hit hard. I think, in that time, it was crazy. And I just sort of took it on, and I looked at it as, I have to conquer this. I have to do this. I have to manage this. This is my world right now. I'm going to have to cut out some of my social things. And that was when I transitioned with the band. I had been in cover bands for years as well. We were daytime professionals and nighttime rock stars. And so I laid that down because I couldn't manage all of it in sleep. So I knew that my job, of course, and my career, but taking care of my dad and my great aunt and making sure that I did that as excellent as I could based on how much they'd given to me in my life, that was my priority. And so I kind of shifted into doing that. And right after that, I developed, it was kind of happening while I was in the band, but I had vocal cord nodules and paralysis in one vocal cord. And so I springboarded from, taking care of my dad and my great aunt. My dad and great aunt both passed away eventually, and I was managing the estate. And then I went into having laryngitis, like a chronic laryngitis. And luckily there was no like cancer or anything. All of it was benign, but it took me about a year of vocal rest to get my voice back. And they said that I may not speak again to full capacity, and that I may probably not ever sing again. Surgery was very risky. And if I was going to have surgery, it could have left scar tissue in my vocal cords, which would have changed my voice. So at that time, my family, again, being strong people of faith, we just prayed that, okay, you got this, God, we're going to use wisdom. And if it's an emergency and I need to do surgery, that's one thing, but we're just going to try to exercise some therapeutic remedies and be smart about it. I treated at the Center for Otolaryngology at Wake Forest. And a year later, he would scope my throat. I had a chronic sore throat. He would scope my throat periodically. And I had speech therapy and all these things and vocal therapy. And finally, a year to the date, he scoped me and the nodules were gone. And so was the paralysis. And so that was a monumental moment for me because I got my voice back. And of course, that's why I love to inspire and encourage people and use my voice wherever I can to do that in the business world or wherever. And then after that, it was crazy because it was kind of like I just kept getting these curveballs. But the interesting thing was out of all of them, I only took 2 months off of work the entire time. And that one time that I did was I was exposed to toxic mold. And I'm highly allergic. I'm allergic to penicillin, and I'm allergic to mold. And I was exposed to it. It almost killed me. It was a very slow progression. I started having these like weird sensations and feelings. I had chronic sinus infections. And then until I became jaundiced one day. And my doctor was like, oh my God. And she had already started to determine that there was potentially a mold situation. We were working on determining which environment it came from. And it had hit my liver. And so I had liver failure, severe liver dysfunction from the mold toxicity. And so I had to take 2 months off from work and go on disability during that time to do liver treatments. And they're kind of like cancer treatments. They make you really sick and tired. And so as I moved through that, but it was interesting because I rebounded very quickly from that. I mean, I was back in the gym right after my liver treatments. And again, that's kind of my personality, but I got my liver treatments and everything and I got, I did the protocols to detox for the mold. And at that time, I felt like I was a biotoxin expert because I learned a lot through that process. And, so that was another curveball that I had during that little kind of, I'd say 6-year window, maybe. And then I was really great for several years. And a few years ago, I developed a sort of an endocrine dysfunction where I had some issues like in my pituitary and in my adrenals, but they really couldn't, even the Duke Pituitary Center could not figure it out. But I was symptomatic for a couple of different things, but they couldn't get a full diagnosis. And once again, I took on the challenge and was faithful. I was connected to an amazing integrative practitioner who was phenomenal in helping me get through that and treating me accordingly. And so now I'm like all great. Like everything's been treated. So I'm like,
nothing.
I'm as healthy as I can be now.
Listening to your story, I think sometimes we go through these periods of life and we feel a little bit like Job and we just keep going and things keep happening. And you're like, really? Why? Another one, another one. And you've certainly been through that. So during all that piling on in a short period of time, I guess what was the scariest part of that for you? And how did you, and I don't really say that it's resilience to do that, but I think it has to do with the mental state that says, I'm just going to keep pushing forward. How did you self-talk or, you know, power yourself through those situations?
Well, that's a great question. That's a really great question. And you're right. I love the story of Job because it does talk about faith and perseverance and really losing everything and having all of it restored twofold. And so I love that story. That's absolutely one of my favorites in the Bible. And for me, I remember a couple of the moments when I had my liver failure and I was jaundiced. Before I started liver treatments, I remember I had actually led worship at church that day. That was the weird thing. I came home, I wasn't feeling that great. Was going through some testing and stuff to determine, if I truly had mold toxicity and stuff. And I came home and I took my makeup off and I was jaundiced and I looked horrible. And I think in that moment when I saw myself, I was like, oh, like something is really wrong. And I called my doctor immediately and they started liver treatments the next morning. And I think at some point in the first part of that, I remember feeling so horrible that because I couldn't even stand up long enough to cook an egg. I don't even know how I stood on the stage and led worship that day. Well, I know because of my faith, and I know that God carried me through. But I remember saying, okay, God, if this is my moment, if I'm meant to stay here, if my time is not done here, you help me come out of this thing swinging. You help me fight this. If it's my time to transition and my impact would be greater in that capacity, then I'm going to trust you. And I need you to help me have a peace about this. But I want to fight it until I can't fight anymore. And all of a sudden, there was certainly a shift, I feel like, in a peace. And I started feeling better from my liver treatments. And I think that for me was a scary moment, if you will, because I tell people that they're like, how would you describe that? And I said, I felt like I had the cloak of death on. I felt like, I faced my mortality. I was staring my mortality right in the face. And it changes you, and it makes you so much more grateful for everything.
How
It
old were
gives
you
you,
at that time? How old were you?
I think 38.
Yeah, that's very young to be looking death in the face. And I'm a cancer survivor, so I understand what you're talking about. I was 46 when they looked at me and said, you have breast cancer. You have a 4 centimeter tumor in your breast. And I remember that conversation vividly and thinking, wow, because you really don't think you're ever going to die, especially when you're young, you're going to
Right.
live forever. And having those conversations mentally within yourself and saying, okay, I've really got to think about this. And then how do you move past that? How do you move through it? And obviously, you have faith, I have faith. And we are both still standing here, and looking back on that event. But tell me a little bit about, after all this and moving forward, because you, again, you came back into your career, but yet you changed your career. And did you, I would think that as a singer, also the possibility of losing your voice, because that's so much of, when you're an artist, that's so much of who your identity is losing your voice and losing part of your identity. Those things had to be very challenging for you. So tell me how you work through those things, and are you singing again?
So yes, I am singing again. I do it more as a hobby, of course, and I love projects. Like I'm a project-oriented person with it. Like I love to work and collaborate with musicians from all walks of life, whether it's jazz or variety cover stuff or you know blues. I love blues. I still do weddings, of course. I have actually sung also at funerals my entire life. And which is kind of a weird thing. Some people are like, that's kind of weird. But as I got older, I realized that that was something that was my give back, that I had done it since I was young, and I could just do it. And I could do it and know the protocols, and I could do it and provide peace to the family or give them something back. And so I started looking at it that way. And so I've kind of been a funeral singer my whole life, as well as a wedding singer, but also cover bands. And then worship leadership I've done, for churches. I've been a soloist and done worship leadership with bands, done community stuff with bands. And it's a huge part of my DNA. It's a part of my identity. But when you think of losing your voice and not being able to express that part of your DNA, even just from a conversational standpoint, I actually had an aunt who, once my voice came back, she was a smoker, and she went through a tracheotomy. And it gave me a whole new empathy for people that go through that, and understanding, I lost my voice for a year. She's lost hers for a lifetime. Now she's a talker like me. She loves people, and she has mastered her device. She's phenomenal. She went through a lot. And I can't imagine that. Like, even going through what I did, I can't imagine losing it forever. And I was lucky, even though I have a strong faith, we all know that God is no respecter of persons. We don't know why sometimes things happen. I lost a stepsister when she was younger, when she was 11, to a heart defect. And we don't know why some people end up on a different path than others when it comes to that. But I was certainly grateful that there was still more for the voice that I had to be able to be used in the way that it had. Now, it was a little different when it first came back. It came back like strong, and vocally I had to relearn how to use it. Like, it was just like, wah. And so there was the voice control vocally I had to learn dynamics again. And so it was something that I had to do a lot of vocal therapy for. I had a great vocal therapist and speech therapist. And so it was an interesting time. And at the time, I also did training and education, on the pharmaceutical manufacturing side of the business for my staff. And I remember I had this one lunch and learn at that time in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I was down to a whisper. And they were so gracious and accommodating, and we just stood close. And I actually thought at one time I might have to get like a PA and a microphone, because I'm like, where there's a will, there's a way around this. It may not be traditional and it may be unconventional, but we can do this. And this was back before all of this stuff, the Zoom meetings and all that kind of stuff. So, it was interesting to go through that, but it certainly taught me an even greater amount of empathy for people in that way, and in what they go through if they do have to experience something like my aunt has. Like, it's hard for them to have a job. There's no job outlets for people that go through that, because even if you're taking phone calls, you have to be able to speak, and people have to be able to understand you. So it's really hard. And I think learning that was a gift. I think anytime you can learn anything through tragedy, or what seems to be tragedy, is always a gift, for sure.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. I think, in my cancer experience, one of the things that I learned was how supportive people are. And sometimes there are people that you don't even know that know you that well, but they reach out and they send a card, they do something to give you an idea that you'll make it. I guess that's just it. I can remember so well one of my clients, because I was working at Cobb Animal Clinic at the time. I was diagnosed, and I really didn't tell anybody that I had cancer, not my clients. And so somehow or another, Ms. Alberti found out. And at the time, she gave me this little pat on the back. I think she was 80, and she was this beautiful woman who was always immaculately dressed, and her hair was always perfect and her clothes were always wonderful. And she just was the best client ever into this beautiful little white dog that we always groomed. And she called me over and she said, Debbie, I hear you have a little problem. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I do. And she said, well, I just want you to know that I had breast cancer when I was 60 and I had it again at 70 and I'm 80 and I'm still here. And honey, you're going to be all right. And
Oh,
that was just a lifeline to me to think, okay, here she is. It's 20 years and she's still here. And in 20 years, I'll still be here too. And so I've always tried to, when I hear women who've been diagnosed with anything like that, I've always reached out to them and said, hey, this is nothing that I'm going to hide from you. A lot of people don't put their health conditions or whatever out there in the public, but I just kind of feel like people who can see somebody who's been on that journey and made it out the other side are always so grateful. I was to see somebody who's 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out, and it just gives you just a goalpost almost to say, hey, if she can do it, I can do it too, because it's a traumatizing experience, but it also, like you said, gives you greater empathy for what other people are going through and appreciation for the humans in your world. I did want to ask you, through these transitions and obviously you're in a different role now than you were in pharmaceutical sales. But tell me about the people that supported you and the value of networking and the people that you knew and reached out to or that reached out to you to get you where you are today.
so I think the biggest story that I would have for that was when I was kind of coming off of the sort of endocrine crisis dysfunction that ended up leveling out. But I remember um, in that time frame, right after that, a couple of years ago, it was actually when I transitioned my career to this side of the business, which I absolutely love. It's been a blast. And I mean, it's just a gift. And so I remember that I actually got to attend my own funeral. And when I say that, and I think you're right, Debbie, back to what you said about the transparency also, I want to echo that because I think sometimes people are afraid to be transparent, and certainly there's a time and place for it. But we help each other so much because if you've lived long enough, you've gone through some stuff, and there's similarities and parallels in whatever your story is that you can help each other and maybe lift somebody's head that day. And I think it's really important to be able to be transparent. And you and I are birds of a feather. Obviously, we always have been, even from our initial connection. But a couple of years ago, I felt like I got to attend my own funeral. And the reason that I say that is because it was a transition for me. I had been really sick. I had come off of all those things. I was at a place in my career that I was considering a transition. I was looking and exploring and had been. And I finally had the opportunity, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I knew there were some lanes that I might want to go in, but I still wasn't sure. I knew what I liked. I knew what kind of like company and culture I wanted to go with. I knew what I wanted to do in terms of maybe leveraging my network to help in another way. And I didn't really know what that area might be, or if it would, be in animal health or otherwise. And I remember having the opportunity. I had a great opportunity, and I can't express this enough, an opportunity to take some time off from work and allow my body to sort of reset from all the compounded things, because I had still managed a full-time traveling job and managed all these things. My customers and stuff didn't know it. Like I still had a game face. It wasn't, because I didn't want my customers to be burdened with that. I was there to service them. And, a couple of my friends knew and stuff like that. But I remember having the opportunity to take time off from work. And my husband and I at that point had decided, you know what, the way you have worked and everything that you have managed, we are in a place that you can take time and you can be selective and you can figure this out. You can figure out what you want to do. And I remember thinking, I'm not used to that. I mean, I worked full time from the time I was 15. And that's just me. And I've always been a go-getter and let's do everything. And I think most women are, because we know we can do it all, but sometimes we forget that we don't have to. And so it was at that time that I laid a lot of things down and had the opportunity to do that and take some time off, to be selective. I didn't have to rush, to find that thing. I could just kind of be for a little while. And it was so crazy because it was like instantaneous almost. As I started, with the time off, my health, all of a sudden I started feeling each month like it rebounded so rapidly. I had never had that much time off. At first I was like, your fear is, I don't know what I'm going to do with all this time, but you find things to do and you find fun things to do and you find good things to do with your time. And so then during that time, when I went and told my distributor partners and my former clients, because you know how it is, we become family.
Yes.
And very close. And I was blown away by the things, like the support that I got, people hoping that I was going to stay in the animal health arena. Like the animal health community embraced me wildly. Like I almost get choked up when I think about it, because it was like attending my own funeral, but being there alive to witness what people were saying in my circles and to me. And they're like, I can't believe you're not going to be doing this, but, we hope you're going to stay in animal health and we love you. And people would cry. And I mean, it was, I can't even tell you. I even had a competitor reach out to me who we knew each other. I would speak to him in clinics, but we didn't know each other. And I remember he called me and he was like, I heard that you're not going to be, in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And he was like, Terri, you made me up my game as a rep. And I was floored. I was absolutely floored. He ended up being one of my references. And the fun thing was we developed this incredible friendship through that summer. And, I still got to stay in touch with everybody, because I think you think when you lay something down that your connections are going to be severed as well. And what I learned from that experience, from my former colleagues nationwide to my distributor partners and to my, even some of my competitors and stuff, that those that are meant to stay in your world are going to be there. And I mean, I went the whole summer talking to everybody. It was so much fun, and people calling me and, asking me what I was doing. I even had some veterinarians offer me jobs and I was like, no, I'm taking time and I don't have to rush into anything. And so I wanted to be selective with my next chapter, and I wanted it to be the right fit, the right company, the right culture, and the right thing. Ultimately, I wanted to be able to leverage my network and combine that to help veterinarians in a different way. And at the time, there were more and more groups coming along that were doing that. But I had seen some of the transitions that my former clients had gone through. And I had also had a former client who had committed suicide. And I've experienced that with some friends and stuff before, former bandmate. And so I really had this huge compassion watching some of my hospitals go through transitions that weren't what they expected, if they did make their exit or transition to a corporate group. And before that, it was, it came on the scene about within a 3 to 4 year period. Progressively, there were more groups coming along, and not that they were all bad. I don't want to say that. There's some good groups out there and different groups, and it depends on what you want. But a few of them that my clients had experienced were not good transitions, and it wasn't a fit for them. And I was like, wow, if I could really do that for the right company, then that might be the very thing for me. and I could still leverage and enjoy my network. And especially after they were so supportive, I'm like, I can't leave animal health now. Like I knew these people were awesome. But when you see that and you're at your own funeral, what you feel like is your funeral because you're transitioning. It's just like when you're going into retirement. Most people are like, they feel like it's the end, and it's really just the beginning sometimes. And so I remember witnessing that and saying, I've got to stay now. These people are even more incredible than I already knew they were, because you are family. And so
Such a
fortunately,
small
yeah,
community.
fortunately.
I used to laugh and say that the faces never changed, just the business cards. Because we, like you, I mean, you would transition to different companies, but the reps would keep coming in, and like you, when I decided to start a consulting business, my sales reps, the people that I knew in the profession, reached out and put me to work. And I think that that's, people will ask me, well, how did you become a consultant? And I went, I just think I had a lot of friends who saw what I did and said, she really knows what she's talking about because we've been in her practices. So let's put her to work and let her share it with other people. And that's what happened. So it is amazing that the network lifts you up if you have been good to it. And I think that is the thing. We talk a lot about not burning bridges. It is an extremely small community, and your behavior matters. And when
Absolutely.
you have behaved well and been supportive of people and kept your part of the moral code, then they feel very safe in supporting you and in whatever your next thing is, and you develop a lot of trust. And trust is so important when you are either being an entrepreneur or especially doing what you're doing, because you're talking about people who've built their practices over their lifetime. It's their baby, and they have teams that they care deeply about. And then they're going to transition them basically to strangers and saying, here, take care of my people. And are those strangers trustworthy caregivers of that next group of people? So it sounds like you found your niche, you found your perfect match.
Well, I think it was a combination. I mean, I think you can, you know, I think it's true what they say. John Maxwell has a quote, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think you can find your niche, but if it's not with the right leadership, then you're not going to be happy. So even when you find your niche, you have to find the right group of people to partner with and do it with. And for me, it was Innovative Petcare. I had actually had been recruited by various groups of companies and other industries and in this industry. And when I got connected to Innovative Petcare, it was through my network. It was through a colleague who had started with them a year prior, that came from, we had worked alongside each other with the same companies, and we'd been through transitions and mergers and all that stuff together through the years, and had the same portfolio, but obviously we had a different stamp on our forehead at different times. And, she called me and said, hey, we're looking to expand in the Carolinas and implement a regional manager that way. Would you be interested? And, she said, and she lived in Texas. So we were great friends, but we didn't get to see each other often. Typically it was at our meetings, our national meetings and stuff like that. And, I always remember, because of that network, because of how we treated each other, we had a huge respect for one another. And, so then I flew out to Austin and met our VP and co-owner of the company and the CEO and the team, and interviewed. And it was everything that I explored about the company and culture, and all the research that I did and the people that I talked to. I had former clients that had also transitioned and talked to them, and they had nothing but great reviews. And so for me, I did a lot of homework to make that determination that, okay, maybe this is my niche, but is this the group that I want to do it with? Because I knew the ones that I did want to do it with. And I was ecstatic to be able to find that. And now that I've been here, a year and a half or so, I am even happier that I made that choice and that I took a chance. You know, they took a chance on me and I took a chance on them. And it has been a great, great, great partnership. I love it. I love getting to help veterinarians in a different way. I love the uniqueness in what we do because we're not like a buying group or a typical buying group. Like you said earlier, we do partnerships. We help associate veterinarians have ownership. If somebody's wanting to pass their legacy to an associate who's kind of iffy, but they might want ownership if they had the right partnership and support. We have some owners that just partner with us and do joint ventures to bring on our benefits and stuff. And then some that want to fully exit in a few years or sometimes 5 or 10 years down the road. And we do consulting, and it's a very informal conversation, but we customize to suit their need what they want to accomplish. You know, I've had partners that have come about from the age of, 32 to 55, even like people that weren't before COVID even considering doing anything, that were like, I think it's time. We're not promised tomorrow. And people love the fact that we have a customizable and collaborative partnership with them, that they have say-so, they have autonomy, that we don't come in and put our stamp on their forehead, that they are still who they are as a veterinary hospital in the community, that their legacy still looks the same, their staff still looks the same. And we just bring on a lot of support to help them if they need it and to enhance their legacy as they want it. So, and training and development and just so many benefits and resources. So it's been a really great fit for me for that reason. Like you said, I found my niche, but I also found it with the right group, which is also, what veterinary owners look for. They're like, especially when they're considering their future.
Yeah, I do want to backtrack a little bit because one of the things that you said really triggered something for me. And that was you were making this decision and you did your homework. And I think a lot of times that people end up kind of falling into a job without really doing the research. And I see young veterinarians who go into practices, and of course we know the statistics are that the young veterinarian new graduate, chances are 75% they are not going to stay with the first job they take. They're going to quit after their contract is up for the first year and jump ship. And some of that comes from their naivety about how to look at a business and say, is this a good fit for me and my values and my cultural needs? So tell me a little bit about your discovery process, because I think maybe your law school stuff, your paralegal research, maybe background came into that. But how did you look into all these different companies? You had a lot of opportunities. How did you figure out which one? What did you look at, I guess? What did you look at the most?
Integrity. That was probably the number one thing, was integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that whatever my face was on, if it was in a capacity that I was going to be in front of people and talking to them about passing their legacy or partnering for their legacy and their future, that it had to be, something of integrity, that I had to represent, because that's very important to me. It always has been. It was instilled in me time and time again from my parents. And my dad used to have a saying that was, when you get older, you'll find that you need, your social security number, a good credit score, and good character and reputation. And he said, those will be the things that will carry you the furthest.
Right.
But, he said, your character and reputation is just as valuable. And my mom has always instilled that as well. And, I think when that's really important to you, and when you come to a time in your life that you can be selective. I had that opportunity. I had the financial ability to do that, and not everybody does. So sometimes you have to do your homework a lot faster, but just researching with the resources you have available. For me, I had, references that had transitioned, former clients that I had great relationships with, and they were like family to me, and had transitioned, before me coming on board. And I also had the information from some of my former clients that transitioned elsewhere to what they didn't like or what they did like based on what they experienced, from the front staff to the owners of the practice. And that gave me the ability to use all of those things to ask those questions when I interviewed. And I think people forget too that you're interviewing each other.
Exactly.
You know, now certainly when you're younger, you need to just take a job. I mean, I've always been taught you have a job, you work, and that's our generation. You know, I think that was engraved in our DNA for sure. So I think being able to utilize that, and also being older, I was 46 or well 44 because I'm 46 now, and knowing what I wanted, what I didn't want, that I didn't have to just take whatever, that I had time, that I could be more selective. It does give you the opportunity to explore those resources and do your research and do your homework and really just interview them. And I don't mean like, you know, like this hard interview kind of thing. I just mean it's a conversation. It's asking questions about some things you're curious about and being able to do that.
Well, and you also want to make sure you're working with a company that's transparent about things. You know,
Absolutely.
asking those questions and they're hedging and hemming, and or they can't really answer, or they pat you on the back and go, "Well, it'll be fine." Well, maybe it won't be fine. You know, maybe that's something you need to dig a little bit deeper in. And when I'm talking to young veterinarians, I always encourage them to talk to the staff of a hospital that they're working in and ask, how long have you been working here? And if everybody's only been there 6 months or less, that's probably a red flag that there's a problem with culture and longevity. And we want to make sure that there are people like, oh, we really love it here. We've been here forever and we have a great, you know, it's a family and we support each other and this is a good place to work. Because that's the people who are on the ground, and you can get a good impression. And it's very similar to the opposite too. You know, sometimes the candidates come in and they give a very good first impression, and 2 weeks in, you realized you've hired, you know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it's not
Exactly.
very well. You're like, uh-oh, we screwed up. But I just do think that, you know, not being or actually strategically thinking about what you want, because people will go into a job and then be unhappy in it. And, you know, we spend so much of our lives at work or thinking about work, driving to and from work. This is something we should enjoy. And I'm not saying you're going to enjoy 100% of it, because, you know, I managed practices and I did love it, but there was parts of it I didn't like. I mean, to do the paperwork was boring, and to write bills and pay checks and write payroll, it was boring, but it was part of the job. But it came along with all the good stuff too, where I got to manage the people and see the clients and solve problems and be creative in growing the hospitals and marketing and the fun stuff. So what advice would you give someone who's facing this big career decision? Because you could have very easily gone right back to where you were and picked up pharmaceutical sales and jumped right back on that same horse, but you chose to make a different decision. So what would you advise people who are just kind of burn out what they're doing and they're looking for something different?
Well, I would encourage you to, certainly if you're at a juncture in your career where, you know, you're older and you are at that phase, that if you can take the time, and I thought I would never say this in my life, trust me. I was the person that was wondering how I could retire. And I just didn't think I could do it. I was like, I don't think I could ever retire. And I'm that person now that tells you and that to take that time. If you can afford to take that time to really be selective, and you've never had the kind of time off, then take the time. It's going to be a positive, and it will help you clear your mind without being pulled out in a million different directions to be able to explore a variety of things and areas. And that time may be different for you. I mean, I had certainly planned on longer. I knew that I wouldn't be able to sit still for long, but I certainly had a lot more time. I think I was off maybe 4 months. I had planned on a year. Um, and, or closer to a year before I had to like hit the panic button or anything. And having that time was just so valuable. I tell people even like during this pandemic, and it's had its challenges for everybody. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not making light of that because people are in different places with this whole thing. Some people have lost jobs and everything. So my heart goes out to them. But if you have been in a place where you've had some downtime, maybe working remotely has given you a little bit more downtime or whatever, you will never get this back. That time that I took off, I remember thinking, I'll never get this back. This is the first time in my career, and even in college and high school, that I have not worked and that I don't have any other things going on. You will never get that time back. And you don't know what opportunities may be coming moving forward, that you might be busier or that you might be a parental caretaker that you need that energy for. So there's so many curveballs that life throws at you at different seasons, and they only last a season, but you might be preserving that energy for something really incredible, and it may be something really challenging. So if you can take the time, I would suggest certainly making sure that your financials are in order to be able to do that, and determine what that time looks like for you, because everybody's different. If you're younger, we live in a microwave society where people start out in their 20s thinking they should be a CEO. And I know there's certain exceptions for that, so I'm not making light of that. But I remember in my 20s, I was hired as a senior paralegal of the first firm that I was hired at. And I was there 6 months, and then I moved to another one, and I was there for about 6 years. The first one was, he hired me as a senior real estate paralegal. And I was like, oh, this is great. He's hired me because my resume looks good and my GPA, I had a 4.0 GPA and stuff. And I thought that's what it was. No, he was desperate. I worked from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. at night. I had maybe some nabs for lunch, crackers. We call them nabs in the South.
Yep.
So I thought then, oh, this is a huge compliment. And it was, but what I realized was nobody else wanted that job, and he needed somebody desperately. Not to diminish, my education and stuff. But then, I moved on to another law firm who actually networking is what got me the job. And it was an 8 to 5. And then I went to school at night to finish my undergrad. And it's so funny because I tell younger people, I'm like, experience the experience. Like, don't forget to experience the experience. All of those career moves and changes and shifts, it doesn't have to be a straight line. I had a combination of experience, but enjoy the time in between, because it's I would manage people way different now than I did in my 20s, And don't get me wrong, because that generation is incredibly valuable. I think we all need each other, and together we make things great. You have fresh ideas, and, I think every generation is important. But I would probably suggest to them, like, take the job and look at it as an experience, but not where you're going to land, not where you're going to be forever. You're not stuck there. You're there as it's a stepping stone for you. I think, if you've heard of the bends, which scuba divers get,
Mm-hmm.
and since your show's called The Bend, if they ascend too quickly, or anybody that goes scuba diving, it can lead to traumatic health problems and even paralysis and death. So I would probably ascend too quickly. Don't forget to take in the view along the way and learn and grow from it.
Yeah. That is so true. I gave a talk to the pre-vet students at NC State, and it was talking about career. And I said, look, I have done so many things in my career. I wish I had, honestly, looking back, wish I had had more jobs so that I could have had more variant opportunities. But I managed a fabric shop. I sold jewelry in a jewelry store, which I didn't make any money doing that. I just bought jewelry. And it was like one of those big box retailers.
Uh-huh.
And every single one of those things I learned from, and I grew up in the restaurant. It's like you, I started working when I was 12, child labor. My family was all about that. And every single thing teaches you something that you take to the next job or into the management position or into that sales position. And I'm sure that even your singing and working with bands and audience feedback and learning what worked and what didn't all came into play when you were coming in to make a presentation to a veterinary hospital team because you were an entertainer and you realized what it took to capture attention. So every single thing that we learn going through life has benefit to us if we look at it, that even some of the crappy things, that you can learn from, like what not to do. If you have an employer who is negative or is berating or undermining to the team, then you can say, okay, well, when I have the opportunity to be a manager, I will not do that
Absolutely.
I will not treat people that way. So everything is a learning experience if you take it as such. And life is one constant learning experience. If you are open to it, it will teach you some good lessons. Well, Terri, I appreciate your time, and I know we're running right at the hour here. So I want to know if you have any final words of wisdom that you can tell people who are experiencing their own personal bend or looking for that next transition in their lives.
Well, I think, you had mentioned even like favorite quotes, and I have so many, but for purposes of kind of the topic content for this, probably one of the ones that resonated with me a lot, and there were several about, success, and was a smooth sea never makes for a skilled sailor. And that was by Franklin Roosevelt. And it's so true. There's so many skill sets that you learn from the bumps in the road, the bends in the road, and they make you stronger, they make you better, they equip you for the next thing. And even like I said earlier, I sung in funerals growing up and even sung at my stepsister's. And I remember, like, if I looked back, I couldn't count the number of funerals and weddings I did, but I remember I sung at my dad's funeral, and that was his request. But I wouldn't have been equipped for that, 20 years prior. I had to go through the callousing of doing everybody else's to get to his to be able to do it while keeping myself decently together, of course. So I think the same is true in our career. I mean, learning what not to do in those bends to be a better person, and knowing that in your network, people, if you're genuine or not, if you have to read a book to be a networker, then maybe that's not the lane for you. If it doesn't come naturally that way, or you've got to sharpen some skill sets to get there, then work on that, learn and grow in the process. If you have that thing that you want to do, but maybe you're not that great at, the things that you're passionate about, but also that you're gifted in, because of things. But if you're really gifted in something and it's really natural for you, you will love it no matter how busy or chaotic it gets at times, or you'll still enjoy it. And so I think probably some of those seeds would be the ones that I would plant for somebody that was looking or trying, whether it was now or maybe they were making a change later in life. I think we all kind of make changes every 10 years. That's kind of been the average for me in a career setting. And I think as we make those changes, just exploring, hey, what was I good at during this time? What was I not so good at? And really weighing the odds on those things and getting the development in the areas that you need to, and then also exploring the areas where you excel and where you are able to be passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And we just need to keep in touch more often because it's been a long time and we need to keep connected. If we're going to put your information up about how to get in contact with you at the end of this episode. And
Okay.
if you have any favorite books or any favorite information you'd like to share, certainly about your own work outside of Innovative and inside of Innovative, I'd like for people to be able to get in touch with you. But thank you very, very much. It's been a great interview, and you certainly have been through many, many bins and come out unscathed and wise. And so we appreciate that wisdom.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It is really great to be able to connect with you face to face. I know we had reconnected on LinkedIn and was talking, even a year or so ago. And so it was really great to see you again. And you're right, we need to stay a little bit more vigilantly and intentionally connected for sure. But certainly this is my pleasure, and it was an honor to be on here with you today. And it's great to see your face. And I'm excited for everything that's happening in your world as well, and the success. You certainly glow, and you can tell it's your niche as well. So I am grateful that I connected with you many years ago, and that we still have that long-time friendship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of The Bend, and stay connected with our audience. We have such wonderful guests coming on, and we hope that you enjoy them every week as they roll out.